In the U.S. state of Iowa, there is a small village town called Villisca. In the early 1900s, the population of this place was around 2,000. At that time, a small family of 6 lived here. The head of the family was Josiah Moore, his wife was Sarah Moore, and they had 4 children: Herman Moore, Mary Moore, Arthur Moore, and the youngest son, Paul Moore, who was 5 years old. The Moore family was one of the most respected and wealthiest families in Villisca. Josiah Moore owned a hardware business which was running successfully. The family was deeply religious, especially Sarah Moore, who often went to the nearby church for prayers with her family. Life was going well. The date was June 9, 1912. That day, Sarah Moore asked her husband Josiah Moore to come home early because there was a special program for children at the church, which she herself was going to host. In the evening, Josiah Moore finished his work early and returned home. The entire family got ready and went to the church where many children had gathered. Among them were Mary's friends, Lena Stillinger and Ina Stillinger, who were sisters. Mary invited both of them to stay over at her house for the night. The sisters agreed, and Josiah obtained permission from their parents. Around 9:30 p.m., after the program ended, the Moore family returned home along with the Stillinger sisters. After having dinner, everyone went to their respective rooms to sleep. Since they were all quite tired after the event, they fell asleep quickly. On the morning of June 10, 1912, Josiah Moore's neighbor, Mary Peckham, noticed an unusual silence at the Moore family's house. There was no activity, and no one had woken up for household chores yet, even though Josiah Moore and his wife Sarah usually woke up early. Feeding the horse and letting the chickens out of the coop was their daily routine. But as the clock neared 8 a.m., not a single member of the house had woken up. Growing suspicious, Mary Peckham went to the Moore family's house and noticed that the windows were covered with curtains. This was unusual, as the Moore family never slept with the curtains drawn at night. She knocked on the door and called out, but there was no response from inside. When she received no answer, she tried to open the door, but it was locked. After trying for a while, Mary Peckham returned to her home and called Josiah Moore's brother, Ross Moore, on the telephone. Ross Moore, who ran a pharmacy nearby, was at his shop when he received the news. A sense of unease immediately clouded his mind. Without wasting any time, he left and rushed to his brother's house, where a large crowd had already gathered. Mary Peckham informed him that the door was locked. Fortunately, Ross had a duplicate key. He unlocked the door and entered the house alone, instructing everyone else to stay outside. Here it is important to understand the layout of the house. The main door opened into the kitchen, which was a large hall. Adjacent to it was the parlor room, with a door connecting it to the kitchen. Next to the parlor room was the guest room, which had a door leading from the parlor. From the kitchen hall, a staircase led to the upper floor, where Josiah Moore's bedroom was located. Next to it was the master bedroom, which belonged to the 4 children. As Ross Moore entered the house, he walked through the kitchen into the parlor room. He noticed that the small glass panel on the guest room door had been covered with a cloth, and the door was slightly open. When he pushed the door open and stepped inside, he was met with a horrifying sight. There was blood all over the bed. Shocked, he quickly turned around and rushed outside. Without wasting a moment, he ran to call the police. The police arrived at the scene. Their first step was to go upstairs to Josiah Moore's bedroom, where they found Josiah and Sarah Moore lying dead on the bed. Their faces were covered with cloth. They had been brutally attacked multiple times on the head with a sharp object, making their faces nearly unrecognizable. After that, the police entered the adjacent master bedroom, where the children were sleeping. Their faces were also covered with cloth. When the cloth was removed, it was revealed that they had also been attacked on the head with a sharp object, resulting in the deaths of all 4 children. The police then went downstairs to the guest room, where the Stillinger sisters were sleeping. Their faces were also covered with cloth. When the cloth was removed, their condition was the same as the others. In the same room, the police found an axe, completely covered in blood, leaning against the wall. Beside the bed, a kerosene lantern was burning with a dim light. Additionally, in the kitchen, they discovered a bowl stained with blood. All the bodies were sent for post-mortem. After examination, doctors determined that the incident took place sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. The cause of the murders remained unknown. No valuables were stolen from the house. The police focused on uncovering the motive behind the killings. During the investigation, it was also found that the younger Stillinger sister, Lena, had injury marks on her hand. It was suspected that she had woken up during the attack and tried to defend herself. Further investigation revealed that the murderer had taken the axe used in the killings from Josiah Moore's storeroom. While the Moore family was at church, the killer had taken the axe and the kerosene lamp and entered the house. The killer had hidden in the attic, a small loft-like area of the house. When the Moore family finished dinner and went upstairs to their rooms to sleep, and the Stillinger sisters settled in the guest room downstairs, the murderer quietly emerged from the attic in the middle of the night. He lit the lamp he had brought with him, keeping it dim, and covered all the glass windows and doors with cloth. After that, he entered Josiah and Sarah Moore's bedroom. Finding them in deep sleep, he attacked them with the axe. They had no chance to react or defend themselves. He struck their heads multiple times, killing them instantly. Then he moved to the master bedroom and brutally killed all 4 sleeping children. After finishing off the Moore family, the killer went downstairs to the guest room, where the Stillinger sisters were sleeping. He first struck Anna with the axe, which woke Lena up. She tried to defend herself, resulting in injuries to her hand, but being just a 9-year-old girl, she couldn't fight for long. After killing the Stillinger sisters, the murderer left the axe beside them, went to the kitchen to wash his hands, and then exited through the back door. He had the house key, which he had taken from Josiah and Sarah Moore. Before leaving, he locked the door behind him and disappeared into the night. The police began their investigation, and several suspects emerged: Frank Jones, William Mansfield, Andrew Sawyer, George Kelly, and Henry Lee Moore. Let's start with Frank Jones. He was a politician and businessman who owned a farming equipment business. The biggest reason for suspicion was that 7 years earlier, Josiah had worked at Jones's store. However, a dispute arose between them, leading Josiah to quit and start his own business. In a short time, Josiah's business became strong competition for Jones, which made him jealous. Some people even believed that there was a relationship between Jones's daughter-in-law and Josiah, which Jones had found out about. Their rivalry had grown so intense that they had stopped speaking to each other altogether. At the time of the incident, Jones was 57 years old, so the police speculated that he might have hired someone to commit the murders. This led to the name of William Mansfield. Sometime earlier, William Mansfield had murdered his wife, her parents, and his own son. These killings were carried out in a manner very similar to the Moore family murders. However, when his whereabouts were investigated, it was found that he was not in Villisca on the day of the crime. The third and most significant suspect was George Kelly. He was mentally unstable and had been caught multiple times peeking into people's homes. Just a day before the incident, Kelly had arrived in Villisca and attended the same church event that the Moore family had gone to. On the day of the crime, he was staying at a place not far from the Moore family's house. At around 5 a.m., he left Villisca and, while traveling on a train, told a couple that 8 people had been murdered in Villisca. A week after leaving Villisca, he started writing letters to the police. In one of them, he wrote, "I know that 8 people were killed with an axe in that house. I heard the sound of the murders." However, when he was asked for detailed information about the crime, he was unable to provide accurate answers, so he was released. 2 years after the Moore family murders in 1917, Kelly was arrested for another crime. He had requested obscene pictures from his assistant through the mail. In 1917, when Kelly was interrogated again, this time he confessed that he had murdered all 8 people. But when asked for a reason, he said, "God told me to send the children to him." However, due to a lack of solid evidence against him, he was once again released. Apart from him, Andrew Sawyer and Henry Lee Moore were also suspected, but no evidence was found against them either, so they were also let go. Today, it has been 123 years since this incident. Many people claim that mysterious events still occur in that house. Neighbors say they hear screams at night. Friends, what are your thoughts on this case? Be sure to share your opinions in the comments. and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.